Let's go.
What's up everybody, welcome to another camera comparison video. Today I have this Huawei Mate 50 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max. Yeah, we are gonna do a camera comparison between these two smartphones. But before everything, one moment for the sponsor of this video, Pitaka. I really like the dynamic island of iPhone 14 Pro Max, but what I like more is Pitaka protective cases. I've been using Pitaka protective cases on all of my iPhones and Samsung Galaxy S series smartphones. I really love these protective cases because these protective cases not only offers protection but also adds fashion. How? Let me show you. This is Pitaka Fusion Weaving Mac Easy Case 3, and once I put it on my iPhone 14 Pro Max, I can also use Pitaka Fusion Weaving designed Mac Easy charger. Doesn't it look cool? And it also adds convenience to life. So yeah, I love Pitaka protective cases, and if you are looking for protective cases for your newest iPhone, then I will definitely recommend that you should try Pitaka protective cases. Well, let's start our camera comparison between iPhone 14 Pro Max and Huawei Mate 50 Pro. Wait, one request before we start the video. If you find this video helpful, then please don't forget to click on the like button and please subscribe to this channel. Support honest content. What's up everybody, welcome to another camera comparison video. Today I have this iPhone 14 Pro Max and Huawei Mate 50 Pro. A lot of people have requested for this video. I am super excited. Well, check carefully which smartphone has rendered colors correctly, red, green and blue. Check carefully which smartphone has rendered my skin tone correctly, which smartphone has more detail. And also listen carefully which smartphone microphone is working better. I mean, both of these two smartphones comes with an extra noise cancellation microphone, so sound quality should be very good on both of these two smartphones. Okay, check here. Where is the boat? Here comes the boat and here comes the sun. Which smartphone do you think has a wider dynamic range? Well, check everything carefully and make a comment in the comment section below. Let me know which smartphone actually has performed better. One more time, let's check stabilization. Well, it's time to flip to the rear cameras. Let's start our camera comparison between Huawei Mate 50 Pro and iPhone 14 Pro Max. But before everything, one request: if you end up liking this video, then please don't forget to click on the like button and subscribe to this channel. Well, let's start with portrait photos. Huawei Mate 50 Pro depends on the main sensor to take portrait photos. Even if there is a 3.5 times optical zoom lens, we cannot take portrait photos using that zoom lens. Portrait photos are grabbed by the main sensor, and there are options for 2 times zoom or 3 times zoom portrait photos. Unlike Huawei, iPhone 14 Pro Max uses its 12 megapixel sensor tagged to a 3 times zoom lens to grab portrait photos. Side by side, iPhone 14 Pro Max portrait photos are so flourishing, electrifying beside Mate 50 Pro's portrait photos. Anyway, after cropping in, it's clear that in terms of detail and sharpness, there is not much of a difference. But texture processing, white balance, color grading and contrast, these are totally different. iPhone has a bit of a stylistic rendition of colors, more like social media ready, while Huawei Mate 50 Pro has kept things more natural. It looks like the bokeh photos of Mate 50 Pro is closer to reality, but I need to mention Mate 50 Pro has higher contrast. Cause Chloe, I mean the model's skin tone isn't as dark as it is in Huawei Mate 50 Pro, and also she doesn't have as fair skin tone as it is in iPhone 14 Pro Max. iPhone 14 Pro Max with vibrant color grading and wider dynamic range has produced eye-catching bokeh photos. But once we check edge detection, edge cutouts and separation line between the subject and background, I'm surprised to see most of the time Huawei Mate 50 Pro has done it with perfection. Better edge detection, soft and smooth blend of subject and background. Huawei Mate 50 Pro has produced better portrait photos. But based on your personal preferences, you can choose any of these two, cause both have similar detail and sharpness.
Yeah, I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it.
Huawei Mate 50 Pro comes with a 50 megapixel main sensor. iPhone 14 Pro Max comes with a 48 megapixel main sensor. The most interesting feature of Mate 50 Pro is it has variable aperture from 1.4 to 4.0, and that should play a big role. Huawei has a bit warm color temperature while iPhone seems to be more natural. iPhone has added heavy synthetic processing. 14 Pro Max has higher saturation and highlights. Sky color rendition of iPhone is a bit unrealistic. I don't know why, but it's always so blue. On the other hand, Huawei Mate 50 Pro has tried to soak all the colors a bit. Everything is a bit pale. Well, here comes the differences. Having variable aperture, Mate 50 Pro has managed to have better exposure and has managed to grab more light when required. After heavily cropping in, we can even see the red lantern in the photo grabbed by Mate 50 Pro. But that didn't work in all the lighting conditions. In some harsh lighting condition, Huawei has failed to maintain exposure. I think that 6-blade aperture management isn't as polished as it should be. Well, let's check the clouds. It's clear that iPhone has wider dynamic range and Huawei sometimes has shown hint of highlights clipping. Other than that, Huawei has fought neck and neck with iPhone. In terms of detail level, sharpness, shadow details and textures, these are almost similar. There is significant difference in color grading, white balance, contrast and saturation. Which one would you prefer? Please let me know in the comment section, and yeah, if you wanna know about me, I would go with Huawei Mate 50 Pro for daytime main sensor photos. From the main sensor to the ultra-wide sensor, iPhone has continued to overprocess the sky color. Other than that, iPhone 14 Pro Max ultra-wide photos are truly amazing. It's far better than Huawei Mate 50 Pro. It is unusual, but Huawei has some sort of color tint and white balance is far from natural. Actually, that color tint is a result of unbalanced color temperature. iPhone 14 Pro Max has grabbed more details, processed every detail with perfection, textures, sharpness, brightness and contrast, everything is better than Mate 50 Pro. I really can't find any issue to complain about. On the other hand, Huawei Mate 50 Pro ultra-wide performance is so poor that I'm worried. Is it just a stopgap product or is it a true flagship? iPhone 14 Pro Max got a 3x telephoto lens tagged to a 12 megapixel sensor, while Huawei Mate 50 Pro got a 3.5x telephoto lens tagged to a 64 megapixel sensor. At 3.5x zoom, both have performed similarly well. Not much of a difference, but once we punch into 10x zoom, well, Huawei starts to perform better. After heavily cropping in, you can clearly see the differences. Huawei Mate 50 Pro has more detail, sharper textures, better contrast, and amazing post-processing. Huawei Mate 50 Pro has finally done something better than iPhone 14 Pro Max. I am super excited to see how does it perform in low light. Okay, let's check some photos of Chloe. Let's check human photos. In this segment, a lot will depend on personal preferences. For example, Chloe loves the photos taken with iPhone as she can share those photos in social media without any editing. But at a glance, Huawei Mate 50 Pro photos looks much more natural. Actually, none of the phones have managed to perfectly render skin tone of Chloe. iPhone has gave it a bit of a fair complexion, while Huawei has gave it a bit of a darker complexion. iPhone actually has grabbed more details on the subject, and on top of that, iPhone 14 Pro Max has reproduced photos with super vibrant colors, which makes the photos eye-pleasing, makes the subject attractive. Huawei Mate 50 Pro photos are slightly underexposed and contrast is also a bit too high. Warmer white balance and soft textures hurts the photos. Huawei Mate 50 Pro performance is no way steady. It has focus metering issue, it has exposure metering issue, it has failed to grab photos in quick succession cause it requires more time to grab and process. If Huawei can fix all these issues, then maybe Huawei Mate 50 Pro would be able to reproduce better human photos than iPhone 14 Pro Max. But for now, human subject photos of iPhone 14 Pro Max is way better than Huawei Mate 50 Pro. I cannot lie to my subscribers and viewers. I am always fond of all the iPhones, especially from iPhone 11 series for truly natural selfie photos. However, I'm truly surprised to see that Huawei Mate 50 Pro selfie photos have pretty low detail level and textures are awfully soft. It is frustrating that even if Huawei has better color grading than iPhone 14 Pro Max, the total output is so poor. As I have mentioned, Huawei has less detail. Moreover, like many other Chinese brands, Huawei has also decided to add some beauty effect into this Mate 50 Pro. Even if Huawei Mate 50 Pro has slightly better skin tone, iPhone 14 Pro Max selfie and selfie portraits obviously have wider dynamic range. In portrait mode, none of these two smartphones have managed to detect the edges correctly. There are crazy edge cutouts, but iPhone with enormous detail, better exposure, sharper textures and wider dynamic range has produced way better selfie portraits than Huawei Mate 50 Pro.
Toss me the ball, I'm a really big hitter. Big picture, I'm a straight killer. Rising the song to the highest bidder.
This set of photos shows the overall performance of these two smartphones in indoor low-light environment. We have to agree, Apple has developed one of the best stock camera algorithm for indoor photography. In indoor environment, most of the Android smartphones fails to compete with iPhone. After checking a lot of indoor photos, it is clear that detail level, shadow, exposure, dynamic range is almost similar, but iPhone has natural color tone mapping, almost natural white balance and better exposure. Depending on ambient light, both have performed differently in different occasions. In indoor photos, Huawei Mate 50 Pro has saturated colors and kept the same warm tone as it has done through this comparison. Both have managed to grab enormous details and processed textures with efficiency. But there are times when iPhone 14 Pro Max has managed to squeeze something better with insane amount of details and sharp textures with clarity. Even if I don't prefer taking low-light ultra-wide photos, I have taken some low-light ultra-wide photos with both of these two smartphones. iPhone 14 Pro Max has a 12 megapixel sensor, while Huawei Mate 50 Pro has a 13 megapixel Sony IMX688 sensor for ultra-wide photos. However, performance-wise, there isn't no drastic difference. Differences are preferential. We have our personal preferences, and based on our preferences, we may choose any of these two. Both have very good detail, less noise, good balance of contrast and brightness, but as usual, there are 4 aspects that matters. iPhone 14 Pro Max has very wide dynamic range. White balance is sometimes very warm in Huawei Mate 50 Pro. Sometimes Huawei has failed to maintain exposure in some tricky lighting conditions, and when there are a lot of colors needed to be reproduced, Huawei has increased saturation for no reason. In general, iPhone 14 Pro Max has done better. Considering all the factors, I will stick to iPhone 14 Pro Max for low-light ultra-wide photos. Time for night mode low-light photos. First thing first, in daytime photos, 14 Pro Max has overprocessed sky color, but at night, iPhone 14 Pro Max has perfectly rendered sky colors. Huawei has overexposed, failed to balance between brightness and contrast. It has awful warm color temperature. Altogether, Huawei has failed to reproduce the scene, while iPhone 14 Pro Max has better exposure, perfect ratio of brightness and contrast, and yeah, iPhone 14 Pro Max definitely has less noise and grains. iPhone 14 Pro Max has rendered colors with perfection, while Huawei Mate 50 Pro has saturated the colors. I personally believe nighttime photos should have the vibe of darkness and it should have enough detail with sharpness. While checking nighttime photos, I check 4 factors: DENS, detail, exposure, noise, and shadow. These 4 factors are the most important factors of any low-light photos. After doing some heavy nitpicking, after checking a lot of low-light photos side by side, I am truly convinced that iPhone 14 Pro Max has more detail, better exposure, it has managed to process and remove noise without compensating brightness. And finally, shadow detail is also marginally better in iPhone 14 Pro Max night mode photos. I do not think there is any doubt that iPhone 14 Pro Max has won this segment. I'm truly surprised to see that a phone from Mate series, I mean, a newly released Huawei Mate series smartphone is failing to put enough fight. What is going on? I'm surprised. At night, I mean in low-light zoom photos, iPhone 14 Pro Max has done marginally better than Huawei Mate 50 Pro. iPhone 14 Pro Max has more definition, more detail, textures are well processed, less noise and grains, better white balance and color grading. Altogether, iPhone 14 Pro Max 10 times zoom photos are obviously better. This wasn't expected. In some occasions, Huawei has very poor exposure and awful white balance. I think Mate 50 Pro needs a lot of optimization to compete with the real flagships. Well, I know a lot of people is waiting for that action mode, but unfortunately, we cannot use action mode in low light environment. It keeps saying more light is required, so these video clips were recorded in 4K using the main sensor of these smartphones. First of all, it was a very harsh condition and almost all the flagships have struggled. iPhone 14 Pro Max has better stability and color rendition. Also, iPhone 14 Pro Max has managed to reduce noise and grains. Huawei Mate 50 Pro has performed similarly, but while moving very fast, Huawei Mate 50 Pro has totally failed to maintain exposure and the whole video clip became worse than any other flagships.
Playing got a weird mind. If you work 8 hours, I'ma work 9. If the shit tastes sour, you should taste mine. I'ma stay in power for.
Alright, finally we're gonna check the action mode of iPhone 14 Pro Max. Actually, it uses the ultra-wide lens and sensor to record action mode videos, so the quality of the video isn't as great and all the action mode videos are actually recorded in 2.8K, which isn't bad, but truly the image quality gets a big hit. We have been swinging the phones to check how good is the focus lock and stabilization. Really, the result is surprising. It works as good as Apple has claimed in their marketing materials. Huawei Mate 50 Pro also have great stabilization, but side by side with this action mode of iPhone 14 Pro Max, that even looks dull. In terms of color grading and skin tone, Huawei has done better. And as I've already mentioned, iPhone 14 Pro Max has less detail and textures as it has used the ultra-wide lens. My personal opinion is Action Cam is a great additional feature and we can use it when we really need this to catch an action moment, but in daily life usage that doesn't add any value cause iPhone 14 Pro Max already has the best stabilization among all these smartphones in 4K.
Picking up all the pieces is a form of art. I'm never gonna look back. Cause damn, I was built to last. You move slow and I move fast. And that's facts. Only I can make a change. Slowly.
Okay, after watching through this video, what do you think about this Huawei Mate 50 Pro? How good is it? I think I'm disappointed. I don't know what has gone wrong with this Huawei Mate 50 Pro, but iPhone 14 Pro Max camera performance is way better than Huawei Mate 50 Pro. And yeah, I think we have to wait for more updates. If Huawei can optimize the camera performance of this Huawei Mate 50 Pro, then I will do another camera comparison of Huawei Mate 50 Pro. Okay, I have done another camera comparison between this iPhone 14 Pro Max, Xiaomi 12s Ultra and Motorola Edge 30 Ultra. If you are interested, then I wish that you will stay tuned and watch that video. I'm planning to do another camera comparison between iPhone 14 Pro Max and Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV. If you are interested, then please make a comment and let me know. If I get enough requests, then definitely I will do that camera comparison video. Well, if you have enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to click on the like button. Yeah, please smash that like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to enable notification.
Yeah, I'm like an addict, do I gotta have it. I ain't even playing, got a really bad habit. If it moves, gotta grab it. Fuse like a magnet, lose, won't have it till I'm doomed in a casket.